Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1123B, and today's date is November 9th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Light Has Triumphed Over Dark, but Something is Lurking in the Shadows. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, during this election, we know the establishment, the central banks, the shadow government, they wanted their candidate in power. That's Hillary Clinton. We know that the corporate media, all the newspapers, pretty much endorsed Clinton. Of course, there was a lot of movie stars out there also endorsing Clinton, saying that they would leave the United States if Trump would win. And we understand that Obama continually said there is absolutely no way to rig the elections. There's no manipulation. He made that perfectly clear. He also said that Russia cyber attacked the DNC and the election system. And if they tried to interfere with the elections, the United States would then cyber attack Russia. Or they were going to cyber attack Russia before the elections. Hillary, during the debates, came out and said, listen, if Trump is in the lead, most likely it's because of Russia, because Trump and Putin, they're together on this, and Russia is going to manipulate the entire election and put it in Trump's favor. Now, we know the establishment, they have the ability to manipulate the popular vote. They have the ability to manipulate the voting machines. And we know that Bev Harris has proved that you can manipulate these type of votes. So what went wrong? Why couldn't the establishment get their person into power? Well, think about what they said. Actually, they shot themselves in the foot. Think about what they said. One, Obama said the elections cannot be manipulated. He also said, and she said, that Russia was cyber hacking and the United States would take action if this occurred, if they tried to manipulate the elections. Well, Hillary actually won the popular vote, and the last count is about 59,729,000. Donald Trump has about 59,511,000, and it's about 200,000 or so apart. So Hillary really won the popular vote because what they did was they manipulated the election and gave her the popular vote. Keep that in mind. Then we see that the Electoral College voted for Trump, went against the popular vote. Very interesting. So the establishment manipulated it so Hillary would be in the lead with the popular vote, thinking that the Electoral College would go along with the popular vote, the will of the people. Now, why would I say this? Well, 29 states created a law, and they passed this law, and they would impose penalties if the Electoral College didn't follow the will of the people, and these electors would be fined. So they thought in their minds that if we give her the popular vote, this would follow. Now, Bix Weir calls them the good guys, the bad guys. I call them the central banks, the shadow government. And there was word of a silent coup. So by doing what they did, they can't say that Russia was manipulating the elections because Hillary was ahead. That would make sense. They couldn't use the Russian card. They also couldn't say, well, this whole thing's manipulated, because Obama came out and said, there is no manipulation. The voting systems can't be rigged. So they were stuck. And we can see the powers that be, the good guys, decided, hey, you know what we can do? We can let them do the manipulation, and we can get the Electoral College to give the presidency to Trump. And what was the establishment going to say at that point? They couldn't use the Russian card. They couldn't say it was manipulated. And all they could do was concede. But the question is it over? Well, for all intents and purposes, yes. But we understand the Electoral College, which consists of 538 presidential electors from 50 states and Washington, D.C. They're going to meet by December 19th. So what we're looking at is they're going to meet, they're going to discuss the election, and then they'll kind of cast their votes and say, yes, Trump is the president. And we know that he received over the 270 that you needed. But what happens if the candidate between the time of the election and the time period where the Electoral Committee meets on December 19th, what happens if the candidate should die or become incapacitated between this time period? If this happens, the electors could pick a different candidate. They would be free to vote for someone else, someone with the popular vote. Am I saying this is going to happen? No. But I'm saying this is what's in the law. This is what they're allowed to do. And if the candidate should die or become incapacitated between the meeting of the electors and the counting of electoral votes in Congress, the Constitution is silent on whether this candidate meets the definition of president-elect or vice president-elect. If the candidate with the majority of electoral votes is considered president-elect, even before the counting of electoral votes in Congress, Section 3 of the 20th Amendment applies. Section 3 of the 20th Amendment states that the vice president-elect will become the president if the president-elect dies or becomes incapacitated. And we can see right now that Hillary at this point has the popular vote. And we will have to see how this plays out. Now, we can see at this point Trump has a long road ahead of him. And he's going to have to decide which way he's going. Is he going with the shadow government, the central bankers, or is he going to go against them? And we can see at this point, most likely, the TTIP, the TPP, Obamacare, these might be dead at this point. Now, Obama still can try to push the TPP through the lame session of Congress, and I think he's going to try to do this. Obamacare, we know that Trump said he wants to get rid of this. It's a complete disaster. Again, he said a lot during his campaign, but we'll have to wait to see what he does. Now, there's a lot of talk about his immigration plans, that he wants to set up this border wall. Well, we already have a border wall. It's about 700 miles long, and he wants to set up a virtual wall. I mean, he sold it as a physical barrier, but he wants to set up detectors. He wants to set up drones. He wants to have more border patrol on this virtual wall to make sure that illegals don't cross. And we can see right now, this is done in many, many countries. He also wants to do other things like a nationwide e-verify system, which they will check to see if an individual is a citizen or not a citizen, and if they're not and they're illegal, they will not be able to get a job. He wants to end the birthright citizenship. This would most likely require a constitutional amendment. He wants to end the DACA, and this is President Obama's executive action for unlawful immigrants brought here as children, which gave temporary work permits and relief from potential deportation. And this is about 665,000 people that came in illegally. Now, the continuation of this program, well, that really depends on the president. And we see that Trump most likely will decline to continue the program, which would mean that he would not renew any of these individuals, and it would open the population up to deportation. We see he's also going to require mandatory detention to detain all illegal immigrants apprehended while entering the United States. This policy is already partially implemented, but he's going to expand this. And he will send those individuals back who tried to jump over the fence, tried to get across the border illegally, send them back and say, listen, if you want to enter this country, you have to do it legally. And people are all up in arms about this. Well, think about this. If you're at a football game and you paid, I don't know, $100 a ticket, and you went with your family to this football game, you paid, you got your seats, you're going to sit down. Then you have a family who jumped the turnstile, didn't pay a dime, and got into the football game. Should these people be allowed to stay in the football game because they made it past security? Or should security eject them because they didn't pay? They didn't go through the process. Well, this is what we have today. We have people jumping into this country illegally, while others are taking the time, doing it right, and going through the procedures. And I don't understand why people can't understand this. Yes, we would all like freedom. We would all like to get into a country that is supposed to be free, democratic. But there is a process to do this. We would all like to go to a football game for free. But again, it's not. You have to pay to get into a football game. You have to pay to get into a movie theater to watch a movie. And those people who try to get in and they're found out, guess what? They need to leave. And these are some of the immigration policies that he talked about, and we will have to see how he proceeds with this. Now, the alternative media has really taken the job over for the corporate media, where the alternative media is looking into situations like 9/11, all the false flag events, pointing out inconsistencies with the government stories, talking about the Islamic State, where they're funded by the United States government central bankers. They're dropping supplies for the Islamic State. They're supporting the Islamic State. They're supporting al-Nusra, al-Qaeda. And we can see right now Trump is in a position to support the alternative media, where he can expose the truth of the government. Now, is he going to do this? Because he would have to expose 9/11. He would have to expose the Islamic State. He would have to expose all the false flags. He will have to end the Fed. And he'll have to go up against the shadow government, the central bankers. And these people are ultra-powerful enemies. They know how to fight back. They know how to threaten people. And they know how to kill people if they don't do what they want. And we can see right now, this is a huge task. Sergei Lavrov is out there saying that Russia will judge the new U.S. administration by its deeds and will respond in kind. So he's not looking for the words. He's looking for the actions of the administration, of Trump. And I would say that that's what everyone should be looking at. Remember, individuals say a lot of things. It doesn't mean that this is what they're doing. We need to look at the actions of this new president. That will tell us what he's really about and what he's doing, who he's siding with. And we realize that the U.S. government, the central bankers, the shadow government, the deep state, the elite, whatever you like to call them, they are still pursuing their agendas. They have not stopped. I know people saying they're on the run. They don't give up power that easily. They're behind the curtain. They're the unelected. And they want to keep their power. They don't want to give it up. And we know that Google, they're looking to change the internet and how we view news stories because they're setting up this fact-based system. We know Obama came out and talked about how the government needs to create some type of fact-based system to get rid of fake news. But the question again is, where are they checking all of this? I'll give you an example. There was a story that came out of the New York Times, the Associated Press, NBC, Daily Mail, Reuters, Global News, where there was a parked car bomb which killed 10 people in Baghdad neighborhood. And they went on and on about this. Troops came in. It was the Islamic State. And this was a real story, that it was absolutely true. Because if you fact-checked it and you used their Ministry of Truth, it would tell you it was a real story. But the problem was, this whole operation was caught on a security camera. And the security camera shows a completely different story. Now, what happened? They showed an individual drive up in another car, ran out, planted something in this junk car, ran back to the other car, drove off. A little while later, the car blew up. Now, there were no people around at all. Nobody in sight. All of a sudden, after the explosion, people ran in to the scene and laid down and pretended they were part of the explosion. People calling for help, people screaming, and we have this video on the X22Report.com site, or if you're on YouTube, you're seeing it there. So what we're seeing is it was completely staged. These are crisis actors. And if we went with the government and the Google fact-checking system, they would have said the alternative media is telling a lie. This is not a true story because the government, the corporate media, is telling the truth. But in reality, it is completely the opposite. So we can see right now their system, depending on who they're checking it with, is going to be skewed. And we can see right now that we're seeing a lot of these events occur. I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden, in the next couple of years, we don't even see mass shootings anymore. Because remember, during Obama's reign, mass shootings skyrocketed. And we've looked at many of them. Many people have looked at many of them. And we've come to the determination that most of them, 99% of them, were false flags. Completely made up. Just like this car bombing. And most likely, depending on which way Trump goes, we probably won't even see any of these events. But we'll have to wait and see how this turns out. We see on the war front, nothing has changed. The United States, they are continually striking different positions near the city of Sirte. We see that they're continually going after those individuals that don't agree with the puppet government in Libya, the unity government, and they're trying to push those individuals back. We see something very odd going on in Iraq, where Prime Minister Abadi is saying that the country is not going to be working with the militants. They're not going to be working with the rebels. They're going to be working with the Syrian government on the state border issue. So they're looking to the sovereign government to talk about locking down the border between Iraq and Syria and not the rebel forces. So it looks like Iraq right now is turning towards Russia, turning towards the sovereign government of Syria, and they're dealing with them. Russia right now has their ships in the Mediterranean, and there was a Dutch sub that was shadowing them throughout the Mediterranean, and we can see Russian warships. Well, it looks like they drove away the Dutch sub. Maybe this was being used for some other type of mission. We don't know right now, but we can see right now the Dutch sub decided to leave the area. So where are we headed right now? Well, we understand that the central bank, the shadow government, well, they're still calling the shots out in the Middle East. They're still calling the shots with respect to what is happening in Ukraine. That power is still there. Obama is still in office. And I wouldn't be surprised if Obama tries to do something during this period of time. Because what we're seeing right now is they are still trying to separate Syria and Iraq and create a different nation. They understand they are beat in Syria. There's no way out of this. Russia, the Syrian government, they have the upper hand. And we can see right now that they're making their move into creating this division. Now, will it work? We don't know, because I don't think Syria and Russia will go along with this, but we'll have to wait and see. And we can see right now, really what they're trying to do is to try to create this area where they can expand it later on. They always start small, then expand later, because everything they tried to do since the beginning, where they were going into all these countries and they were trying to capture these countries, it has all failed. Because we're back in these countries trying to maintain order, trying to keep the puppet governments in power. And what we're seeing right now is that the petrodollar system, as we can see, is doomed. There are others saying that it is completely doomed. And when Trump gets into office, he's going to be briefed on all of this, of why we're really out in these areas, what is really going on. And we're going to have to see how he reacts to this, because he's going to be faced with a situation where this system is collapsing. The dollar is at its end game. The central bankers are getting ready to bring us to a new currency. I mean, really think about it. They did this back in 1971. I mean, they didn't come out and say, hey, everyone, this is our new currency. They just said we're coming off the gold standard temporarily. And then all of a sudden, we were on a fiat system. And all of a sudden, we saw hyperinflation. Well, I shouldn't say hyperinflation. We saw inflation because the dollar was being devalued so quickly. And this is why pay had to be readjusted. This is why housing went up quite a bit. And in the beginning, people were like, ooh, this is great. But here we are at the other end here. We're at the other end of this system where wages are declining, where interest rates are not 14, 15%. They're at zero or negative. We're in a situation where things are completely the opposite. And people are looking at this saying, this system stinks. This is not helping the people. This is the worst ever. And he's going to be faced with all this. And we can see that it's either he comes out and tells the truth, or he goes along with the central bank, the shadow government. And time will tell what he does. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.